Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So one of the feel-good stories of this season is when Kakko, after not really getting much of an opportunity this season with the New York Rangers kind of being stuck in their bottom six, getting traded to the Seattle Kraken, where he now has 13 points in 14 games at Seattle Kraken. He has more points than Alexis Lafreniere on the season. So it kind of got me thinking, what other players definitely need a change of scenery? Maybe getting that change of scenery could lead to us finally seeing them live up to the potential that at one point we thought that they had, or are there just some disgruntled veterans that maybe need a change of scenery? So I got 8 guys. I have 8 guys listed right now, and we're going to go through it. Guys that I think would greatly benefit from a change of scenery. Some of them are going to be kind of obvious. Some of them might be a little bit outside the box, but let's get into it. Up first, one of the obvious ones is clearly Trevor Zegras, considering the fact that 2 seasons ago, he had 65 points, back-to-back 65 points, or back-to-back 60-point seasons, and was looking like one of the future faces of the NHL, at least from a marketing perspective. Then he only has 15 points in 31 games, deals with some injuries. This year, just 10 points in 24 games before getting hurt as well. You could argue that part of that is because of Greg Cronin as the coach, who I'm not that big of a fan of, but it is clear, even watching Zegras this season, he did not look invested into these games. He looked emotionally distraught at times. But one thing I call out, I've said it multiple times, he won the shootout against, I think, the Ottawa Senators, and he didn't even react. Literally scored the game-winning goal and looked like he didn't give a shit out there. I think a change of scenery could be very good for a Trevor Zegras, especially when looking at Anaheim Ducks. They might be more so willing for a change of scenery, considering since that 65-point season, they've drafted Leo Carlsson, drafted Beckett Seneca, and this year, unless they get a top 2 pick, they're probably going to be picking between like 4 through 8. They're probably going to go with forward based on how this draft board is kind of laying out. There's no guys that I love within the top 10 in terms of defensemen outside of Matthew Schaefer. So if they pick up another forward, it might just be mutually beneficial for all parties to kind of trade, to have a nice little trade, maybe bring in some kind of veteran defenseman instead of Trevor Zegras. Next up, Matias Melli. This guy came bursting onto the scenes in the 2023 season when he had 49 points in 69 games. If he didn't get, I think, hurt that season, he probably would have won the Calder ahead of Matty Beniers. He followed that up the following season with 59 points, was an amazing passer and playmaker for the Arizona Coyotes, but this season has not been very good for Melli. He only has 15 points in 44 games, which is like 27-point pace, and it's not just the point production. The ice time has gone down. Andre Tourny, I guess, doesn't really trust him as much as prior years. Part of that is because Dylan Guenther's now a full-time NHLer, but he's gone from 16-13 a night all the way down to 14-03, basically being treated as a third liner at this point in the bottom 6. And if, again, this guy is a great playmaker, great passer, I don't really think that he should be utilized on a third line bottom 6 role. So I could definitely see them potentially moving off, and for Melli's sake, going to a better fit, having better line mates. Teams would definitely value his playmaking, passing, and with Utah, they have guys like Iginla, like Daniil Boot coming up in the system, so it's not going to get any better if he's on this downward spiral. Not spiral, but downward trend for Utah. I think he could definitely benefit to going to some kind of team playing with the far better center, and we'd be able to see Matias Melli really hit his potential, which we thought was going to be 70-plus points, 50-plus assists, or some 45-plus assists based on how he was trending after his first 2 seasons. Dawson Mercer, another guy that dominated in 2023. His first season, he had like 40 points. Then he had 27 goals, 29 assists, 56 points. You thought that this guy was going to be a key part of the top 6 for the New Jersey Devils going forward, considering he did that at like 21 years old. But they did bring in Timo Meier as a result the following season. Still at 20 goals, but only 13 assists. And now this season, 10 goals, 11 assists, 21 points in 48 games. He's kind of playing in that bottom 6 right now. He's on a line with Justin Doling and Paul Cotter. He's kind of been squeezed out of that top 6 because they brought in a guy like Timo Meier, and sometimes they got to throw Palat up there just because they spent all that money, might as well utilize him in a top 6 role. For Dawson Mercer's sake, none of those guys outside of maybe Palat are going anywhere in the next 3 to 4 years. So for his own sake, and maybe the New Jersey Devils could get more of a veteran presence, whether that's within the forward core, maybe attach him to dump Palat remaining like 2.5 years. But I think for his own development, it might be good. I'm not saying they will, because they do have him on a cheap bridge deal. It's not like he's on some massive contract not producing at this high level. But I think if we're going to see the best version of Dawson Mercer, or at least return to that 2023 form, it might have to be on a different team than the New Jersey Devils. JT Miller, no shit here. He was almost traded before Saturday's game, was almost held out of Saturday's game because of a trade. But yeah, at this point, I don't know what exactly is going to happen. It's clear that he's grown a little bit sour in the Canucks locker room, whether that's with Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes apparently. He's definitely a very passionate, kind of hot-headed guy, and he's skilled. He's no doubt skilled, but sometimes he gets on people's nerves, if that makes sense, based on the reporting that we're seeing right now. A team will definitely take a risk on him, considering he is coming off a 103-point season, and I expect wherever he goes, there's going to be some massive bump in his production as soon as he gets there. How long will that last? I don't know, but a team probably should take a chance on JT Miller. And for the Vancouver Canucks, if you can get 2 solid roster players back and a solid prospector pick, I think you definitely potentially do that and just keep Pettersson happy and keep Hughes happy. Those are your 2 true franchise players. JT Miller is great, but it's looking like these parties are going to be split soon. Trent Frederick, after last season, he was kind of looking like the Boston Bruins' future Tom Wilson kind of 2.0 when looking at the overall physicality and skill that he brought, as well as goal scoring. Had 18 goals, 22 assists, 40 points. Has not nearly replicated that this season. Just 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points in 47 games. He's a guy that you relied on for at least another 20-20 season. And considering he's only like 25 years old, you thought maybe he'd take another step. 25-25. He is not, as a result, and he's not the main reason why. Obviously, guys like Lindholm, basically everybody in the Boston Bruins forward core has been underwhelming, but he has definitely been massively underwhelming. And I think he's a guy that still does have some value. Obviously, a guy like Lindholm doesn't have any value, so you could package him in picks or a prospect to get a more established forward. And I think Trent Frederick going to a situation where there's far less pressure than the Boston Bruins, who are really struggling right now, he could really find his game yet again and return to that 20-20 good checking third line kind of guy. Not sure he's ever going to be Tom Wilson like he was maybe trending towards, but he can still be an effective player. Just probably isn't going to be on Boston. The fan base is massively soured on him, and once Boston fans start to hate you, it's kind of hard to get that goodwill back. I could definitely see Trent Frederick be on the move. Kaden Primo, when looking at him, he was a highly regarded prospect like 3 to 4 years ago. It just hasn't really panned out. This year he has like an 836. He's been really bad. And now that Jakob Dobes has really risen to the occasion in his 4 games, on top of Sam Montembeault establishing himself as the starter going forward, and they have Jacob Fowler in the system, there's really not a spot for him. He did have a 9-10 last year with 23 games. So I think if he goes to a situation, if he goes to San Jose, Chicago, maybe the backup next season for the Seattle Kraken, once they probably buy out Philip Grubauer, I think he could potentially bounce back. He's only 25 years old, but it's looking like at this point, Montreal probably has their backup for the next 2 to 3 years in Dobes, as well as Jacob Fowler eventually going to get the call up relatively soon. He just doesn't have a spot at the NHL level right now, so probably best for him to have a change of scenery than play for Laval the next 2 to 3 years. It's not looking like the path to the NHL is really there for him at this point. 7th, Joel Farabee, after a 22-goal, 50-point season at only 23 years old last year, making just $5 million until 2028. You thought that this was going to be one of the best winger contracts in the entire NHL. You expected him to take another step to 55, 60 points, and eventually become a 65 to 70-point guy. That has not happened. 16 points in 44 games. Michkov has definitely surpassed him basically right out of the gate in terms of the depth chart. He's not even a top 3 winger on this team at this point. Definitely Konechny, Michkov, Tippett, and then there's arguably guys that are ahead of him from there. He's not on the top power play anymore because of Matvei Michkov. He's just lost his game, lost his confidence, I would say. And as a result, I think a team definitely still would bet on a guy like Farabee to bounce back, but it's looking like that bounce back probably isn't happening in Philadelphia. If they could package him for some kind of defenseman or some kind of goalie, I think you definitely look at that, and I think for Joel Farabee, it might be the best move for his career. Shout out Flying Michkov on Twitter. He actually gave me the suggestion for this player regarding a guy that needed a change of scenery. And then lastly, I got Bowen Byram, and I'm not saying he's playing bad right now. I'm just saying if we want to see the full potential of Bowen Byram and for his own bank account, if he ever wants to get paid, he's probably going to need a change of scenery from Buffalo, because right now, again, he's playing big minutes, but he's having to play on the right side because they do have their 2 best young defensemen that are under the age of 25 are also lefties. It's tough in a spot for Bowen Byram to really flourish. He's not getting a ton of power play time. He has had decent point production, but yeah, I think Bowen Byram, if he ever wants to get paid like a number one and ever wants to get the reputation as a number one, he's obviously not going to pass Rasmus Dahlin. He could end up being better than Owen Power, but yeah, just not going to happen there. And honestly, for the Buffalo Sabres, maybe you bring in a more consistent right-hand veteran guy like Erasmus Anderson, Colton Parayko, Eric Chernak. Something like that could be beneficial for both parties. Imagine Bowen Byram in Calgary. That would be pretty fun in terms of him just putting up numbers. So yeah, Bowen Byram has definitely, this is probably his best season, like pre-injury, at least. He's been very impressive this year, but I think for his own sake, and apparently it came out that he wanted to be a number one relatively soon. That ain't happening in Buffalo. You're going to have to go somewhere else. You're going to need a change of scenery. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about these 8 guys? Which guys am I absolutely out of my mind for saying they need a change of scenery? Which guys do you agree with? JT Miller, I assume you agree with at this point. And I'll be seeing the next one. Peace.